Hello and welcome. My name is Denis Dublineau. I'm working as a pre-sales consultant at PTC. I'm based in France, as you may guess from my accent. And I will be presenting today our tools for publishing. As you may know, PTC is offering a large set of tools for authoring, creating, managing, publishing, and delivering documents, technical documents, and other documents. And yeah, the purpose today is really to focus on the transformation of these documents and the publishing of these documents. The Arbortext solution is made of several tools which are interconnected to cover the complete document process, from the leveraging of the pre-existing engineering data like BOM or CAD in order to create illustrations, 2D or 3D illustrations, and to create parts catalogs and create author XML content for the service information. Then we can manage the content and the configuration of the content in a relationship with the configuration of the documented products. And then this can be published or printed to various formats and can be distributed using our document portal for service documents and parts catalog, or via augmented reality experiences or multiple other ways for accessing to content. Today we will focus on the pieces of software which are related to this final publishing process. And what shall be remembered is that if all those tools are forming a complete solution, they can be used independently, one of the other, and then can be used for working with multiple types of documents. We will see several examples of documents which have been published using our tools. What am I calling publishing here? It's basically about transforming the document sources into some different format which is consumable by human readers or by other applications. The sources are generally XML content or maybe HTML content, plus referenced illustration files, but in some cases the sources may be something different. Talking about the output, we may want to create page-oriented output, like in these technical documents. You may want these pages to contain content in multiple languages, or we may want to publish in electronic format, generally some kind of HTML with different flavors, but it can also be other XML formats, or sometimes even something not related to XML. Regarding the page-oriented output, we may want to generate and automate documents which have a much more appealing appearance than the technical documents we saw on the previous slides. Here I'm referring to product catalogs or product data sheets or even packaging. So these are, let's say, marketing documents, but it can be also books or training books or scientific journals or documents. We also may want to create smart or interactive PDF, which is containing form fields like this, or which is embedding 3D illustrations or video, audio, and which will provide interactivity between the text and the embedded multimedia components. For doing this, we will need a very strong formatting engine for generating the final layout. But in any case, it shall be understood that before applying the formatting, you need to very often to pre-process the content. So for example, if you think to DITA or to the S1000D standard for documents, you will have to aggregate multiple topics, data topics, or multiple S1000D data modules in order to form a publication. Then you may have to filter the content if you want to generate a publication which is specific to a given product configuration. So you need to filter out any information which is not related to that specific configuration. Then you may want to enrich the content. So for example, if you have a part number in the source document, you may want the name of the part and the price of the part to appear in the final output. So in that case, the information may be coming from an external database and will be inserted into the XML flow which is processed. What we need is really a tool which can pre-process the content and then apply the style sheet for defining the final format. Our solution to these needs is the Arbortext publishing engine. Arbortext publishing engine is what I'm calling a process server. It is a black box, something you install somewhere on your network and which can be accessed by any application via the network using the HTTP or secured HTTP protocol. And that way, any application like a web browser or the Arbortext editor or any system which can issue a GET or POST HTTP request can query a process from the Arbortext publishing engine. The result can be printed or returned to the requesting application or requesting person. The format can be anything like PDF, any flavor of HTML, XML, and also XML bundles. If a set of documents were processed, the result can be an organized set of files which can be loaded in a portal. And typically we have an out-of-the-box capability for generating the bundles which can be loaded into our Arbortext content delivery document portal. The Arbortext publishing engine is deployed as a web server. It is actually sitting into Apache Tomcat. So multiple requests can be sent to the server and the requests will be managed. So we have here several management functions for managing the transactions, for queuing them. You can define pools for the processes that can be performed in order to define priorities between the different kinds of requests which can be sent. You can secure the usage of the system, defining who is allowed to use some of the functions. You can set up a mail notifier so that mails can be sent to the requester when a request has been processed. And then you may have multiple sub-processes which are performing the transformation, and you have several tools available in the box for processing the content. For example, you have a SAX2 pipeline. I will give some details on that. You have the possibility of creating and adding a new transformation or controls in the process. You have access to several implementation tools, and typically on top of the SAX pipeline, you may also use the DOM-based processing capabilities for manipulating the XML tree and applying transformations or control to the tree. You have tools for converting graphics because, of course, your documents may contain illustrations in some formats which may not be the best formats for the output. Let's think to web output. You will want your illustrations to be in a web compatible format. So the source illustration may have to be transformed and converted during the publishing process. And eventually you have the engines which will generate the final output. So in APE you have actually two engines for generating pages and eventually for generating PDF or PostScript files. You have a legacy fuzzy engine which can support the fuzzy style sheets, which was a format heavily used in the aircraft and defense industry. And actually, there are still a lot of companies who are using legacy fuzzy style sheets. So this can be done with the publishing engine. And you have the high performance Arbortext Advanced Print Publisher engine, which can generate a very sophisticated layout and high quality PDF. And you also have an engine which can generate Word documents, actually using the RTF format if you want to convert your XML back to a word processing compatible format. I was mentioning the SAX2 pipeline. SAX is a technical specification which is maintained by a non-profit organization. It says that a complex transformation can be implemented as a sequence of small, dedicated, unitary transformations. For example, one of these steps can be the generation of the table of content. Another can be the substitution of characters between one character set and another character set. It can be applying an XSLT style sheet, or it can be resolving the conrefs in a database document. Each transformation step is implemented in what is called a filter. SAX presents two main advantages. It is very fast for processing large documents, since it is based on a sequential parsing of the XML stream, and it doesn't require the full XML tree to be loaded in memory. And practically, it simplifies the development, the debugging, and the administration of complex transformations by reusing the filters. For example, if you have different document types to process, each document type may require a slightly different total process. So you can share the filters which are common to each document type and just modify the parameters or the filters for each specific document type. APE, the Arbortext publishing engine, comes with out-of-the-box filters and complete pipelines. So for example, you can process and publish data-based publications based on a data map, for example. But if you have custom transformation required or needed in your application, you can of course implement your own filters using the Java language. If required, it is still possible to access to the in-memory XML tree using the AOM API. AOM is the Arbortext extended DOM. When using this AOM or DOM, the programming techniques are the same as the one used for web programming, and it can be done in Java, JavaScript, or VBScript. It's a very common development technique. If APE is pre-configured with functions supporting the most common use cases, for example, the publishing of data documents, it can also be seen as a powerful toolbox for creating custom functions and supporting custom publishing scenarios. For example, it can be used to create on-the-fly, on-demand, personalized documents like marketing documents, proposals, or contracts. So let's think to a bank or an insurance company. The clerks at the desk may feed a form while discussing with their prospect. So they will enter the name and the address and all the details of the prospect. They will select the contract clauses or the contract options which are making sense for the prospect, and the form will be sent with all the entered values again in an HTTP request to the publishing engine, which will fetch the pieces of content from a content library. It will filter the applicable content, and it will add or insert into the XML flow the information which was entered into the form. And APE will process that resulting content and, of course, at the end will format it in the expected format, typically a PDF document, which is sent back to the person at the desk, who now may have a personalized contract to be signed by the prospect. Here I have a very simple example. It's a simple web page, and from that web page I can create a request. You can see the URL of the request at the bottom. It contains the address of the file to be converted, the type of conversion I want to get, it's PDF here, and the name of the APE function which will do the conversion. And if I click, the file is transformed and I'm getting the PDF result immediately. Here I have also access to other functions, and if I want to use one of these administration functions, I have to enter my credentials, which means that the system is protected. At this point, we've discussed the pre-processing applied to the XML flow, and we've discussed a bit, the output. But the next question is really how to create the style sheets, which will be defining the formatting and the layout of the published document. One first answer is the Arbortext styler. Before discussing style sheet developments, we need first to look at the possible complexity for the layout and the formatting we want to apply for generating the pages. And first, I will define what I'm calling the simple formatting use case, which is what we find most of the time in technical documents and what is supported by standardized style sheet formats like XSLFO or FOSI. Basically, it means that all the pages are based on the same pattern, simple pattern. First, you have one single input stream for the XML or HTML content, and that input stream will flow into columns. So, of course, you may have one or more columns which are generally, the same size. And yes, you have this content flowing into the main area of the page. And of course, you may have headers, footers, and left and right regions where you can input some content coming from the main flow. You will have footnotes. You will need to support some level of side-by-side text alignments. Of course, you will want to manage the widows and orphans with priority levels, and you expect in such documents, of course, to be able to support languages, different languages, and typically right to left languages like Arabic or Hebrew, plus the Chinese, Japanese, Korean. Also, you may want the same published document to contain pages in multiple format and orientation, landscape, and portrait. For such simple formatting use cases, the best solution is certainly to use Arbortext Styler. With Styler, you can create interactively multi-channel publishing style sheets without knowing any style sheet development language like XSLT, XSL, FO, CSS, FOSI, and so on. Let's have a look at Styler. I can access to the Styler UI from the Arbortext editor where a document is loaded. So I can easily find the characteristics for formatting the XML content just by clicking on the XML content, and the Styler UI is synchronized. Here we can see that each characteristics we define may be applied to all types of outputs or to some specific types of output. Here I'm working for all types of output, and I'm changing the font to be used for the paragraphs, and I can just apply my change to the Arbortext editor to see the result. Now if I'm clicking on the title, I'm accessing to the formatting characteristics for the title, and I can see that I'm using a property set, which is a way for factorizing the definition. So if several titles are using the same characteristics, like the color here, which is blue, and I change it to green in the property set, the change will be applied to all the titles in the document which are using this property set. It's an easy way for making change and globally, and making sure that the same characteristics will be applied in different parts of the content. Here, locally, for one level of title, I want to change the characters to small caps, and it is applied in the Arbortext editor, and here I can get a preview of the formatting result in a PDF document, where I can see that my change on the level 1 titles has been applied. I can also define my page sets, so all the different types of page I want to have in my document. I can define the page size, if there are portrait or landscape. I can define the margins, and for each page set I can define the page characteristics for the left page, or the right pages, or the blank pages, and so on. And for each page model I can define the regions on the page, and define what kind of content will go into each region. So here I define the page number shall go there, and I define that on the footer I want to have borders. And typically in my footer I will be adding a logo, so a graphic, which will be part of the generated text for the footer. So I'm selecting the graphic file, and now if I check again the result in the PDF file, I will see the logo appearing in the footer, and the page number in the area on the right. The PDF document contains, of course, table of contents. This means that I can define different types of table of contents in my style sheet, and specify which elements shall be appearing in the table of content and how they will be numbered and how the table of content will be formatted. Titles from the table of content can be used for generating hyperlinks in the PDF file or for chunking components in the HTML or web output. Here I have a caution element and I have some generated text appearing in red for that XML element. So I can define and modify the content of this generated text. So I will make a small modification here, and again I can check the result in the Arbortext editor window. Interestingly, for this kind of generated text, I can manage the languages so that my style sheet will be multilingual and will be used for formatting language content in multiple languages. And I have a way here for exporting all the generated text defined in my style sheet into XLIF files, which then can be sent to translators and which can then be re-imported into the style sheet so that my style sheet is really multilingual. The style sheet defined using the user interface can be expanded by writing additional code if I need to have characteristics which cannot be defined in the UI. So here we saw the XSLT code, which is used for generating HTML, and we saw some APP functions used for the PDF generation. Now let's speak about the complex layout and about our Arbortext Layout Developer and Arbortext Layout Editor products. We'll look at several examples. In this example, we have several input streams, and depending on the type of content and depending on the stream, the content shall go and fit into predefined frames or area of the page. This means that the formatting result for each piece of content shall be adjusted for fitting the area. In this example, we have several pieces of content like graphics or tables which must float on the page depending on where they are anchored in the text, and the place where they shall go depend on the type of content or the size of the formatted content. So this may require more or less complex rules for defining exactly where the frames must float and if they can fit on the page. Here in the upper corner we have a very large table which must span over multiple pages, and concurrently we have several information that must be going into specific areas of the same page. Below we have examples where the formatting of the content is wrapping around specific information which must fit always at the same position in the section. And the last example shows usage of color, controlled color, and also again depending on the number of illustrations and the formatting of the page will be recalculated so that the illustrations may fit into the given available area. In this user manuals examples, we have specific rules to follow. For example, here, depending on the size and the quantity of information and the type of information, things will be positioned differently. So for example, in the first procedure, because we have large illustration and not much text, the references to the illustration will be formatted on the left, but below, because the illustration is much smaller than the text once composed, those references are actually positioned on the right, just below the illustration. On the other example, the document must be published in many languages, and we want to make sure that whatever the language, the same information will be printed on the same page number. And additionally, the callouts and the graphical overlay is generated during the formatting process based on information which come from a different input stream. So you may think to many requirements. For example, having content flowing from top to bottom, depending on the language, or mixing together text in multiple languages. In that case, you may want to use pseudo-font for merging characters coming from various fonts so that you are getting a nice result depending on the language you are formatting on the frame. You may want to rotate the content or have the content flowing a random graphical shape, or you may want to create very specific patterns for the borders or for underlying the text or the content in your documents. For defining all these rules and many more, and fine-tuning the typography, there is a tool named Arbortext Layout Developer. Arbortext Layout Developer is a user interface built on top of the APP formatting engine we've discussed, which is available in Arbortext Publishing Engine. Arbortext Layout Developer is a professional tool for developing and debugging the templates. Then the templates can be used in the publishing engine, or of course they can be used in Arbortext Layout Developer itself for publishing documents based on the template. With Arbortext Layout Developer, you can define your pages, your layers, your frames, your columns. You can also define your styles. But if you need complex rules for having the content responsive, so adjusting according to the space, according to specific rules, some coding will be required. JavaScript is the recommended language. With that, you can access to the DOM and to XPath, and of course to the internal functions. So it's using, I would say, a standard implementation and coding technique. And a real-time debugger is provided with the product, so you can test and check what you implemented. The templates developed by Arbortext Layout Developer can be used by ALD itself or by the Arbortext Publishing Engine server for fully automated publishing. You process your input XML flow and you are getting your pre-press ready PDF. But sometimes for very complex documents, you may want to have an additional quality control to make sure that the visual result of the formatted page is absolutely correct. And it's always a trade-off. I mean, shall you spend more time implementing complex rules in the template for supporting cases or situations in the content, which may only happen from time to time? So sometimes it's better not to spend too much time on the development and to set up a quality control process. For supporting this, the APE, the publishing engine, can generate a published page document, so a file where the document has been composed, and that file can be opened in another tool, which is Arbortext Layout Editor. And in that tool, operators may control the formatted result, and if required, they may adjust or touch up the result in order to make it absolutely perfect. When I open in Arbortext Layout Editor the formatted document which was generated, let's say, by the publishing engine, I can see on the right the XML content of the mainstream, and on the left I have the real-time WYSIWYG formatted result. The XML content on the right may be formatted in different ways for facilitating the navigation within the XML content. And here I have some buttons. So basically the UI is not very different from the one of the layout developer, except that the buttons and the features I may access to, like this text width modification window, are controlled and defined by the people who created the template. So as a TOUCHUP or quality control operator, I can only modify things which have been allowed by the template designer, and I cannot break or modify the XML content, for example. So we are sure that I will not make mistakes and create a wrong document. So here on the left in the blue bar, I could access to elements I can insert in the XML flow. So I could transform to bold one term in the content. Here, looking at the formatted result, I'm not happy with this blank area at the bottom of the left column. So in order to correct that, I may choose to modify the text width on one of the paragraph. So the content of the right column will flow in the left column, and the text will be balanced on my page. Another possibility I have in such a situation is maybe to add a graphic in order to fill the blank left area. So here I will select an illustration file, a graphic file, and insert it into my document, and immediately the page is reformatted and I can see the result and see if I am happy with that. Another example of thing I'm allowed to do in this document is to modify the position of a framed illustration. It's an anchored illustration, which by default was going to the bottom of the page, but if I prefer, I can put it somewhere else on the page, and the text will flow around it immediately. When I'm happy with the final result, I can generate the final PDF file and have a look at it to see if now I'm fully happy with the result. As a conclusion, I would say that the publishing tools of the PTC Arbortext solution offer a strong infrastructure and a powerful toolbox for preprocessing the XML flows and for formatting the content to multiple output types. For what I call the simple layout, like in technical documentation, you may create codeless multi-channel style sheets in a very simple way. And for more sophisticated document, you have there a strong professional page composition engine and a development environment for defining the rules required for publishing your marketing or other types of complex documents. You benefit from deployment flexibility. For large organizations, you may centralize the publishing the publishing facility to be shared by all the users and administer that function from a single point on the network. For smaller organizations, you may use desktop applications for a limited number of users. With that, the tools enable cost reduction for publishing a wide range of document types automatically. I'm talking about the usual technical documents, but also marketing or legal or contractual documents. And what is not so common, if you have really complex documents, you may automate them. They're publishing, but you keep the possibility of adjusting the result and touching up the documents. Thanks for attending this presentation. Don't hesitate to contact me for technical questions or to contact my colleague Regine Müller, who is participating to the fair. You can refer to the Arbortext pages on the PTC website or to the Arbortext YouTube channel, or you can also connect with the Arbortext users community on the internet. Thanks again, and I hope to meet you soon. Bye.